We are losing Earth's greatest biological treasures just as we are beginning to appreciate their true value. According to Conservation International, satellite data show that tropical rainforests are being destroyed at a rate of about 31,000 square miles a year, an equivalent to the size of South Carolina. Every single minute, about 36 football fields worth of trees are lost due to deforestation. 80% of this loss is due to unsustainable agriculture, expanding mining and infrastructure and urban expansion are the next most prominent drivers. Forest products account for about 1% of the world's gross domestic.
You did on your map, but
and the total global market.
Really fine, or you just not want to talk?
Including logs, lumber, panels, pulp, is more than 200. Yet more than 1 billion rural people depend on forests to some extent. And over 50% of people living in extreme poverty depend on forests for all or part of their livelihoods. And when forests are cleared, they emit carbon dioxide. And nearly 11% of global greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans can be blamed on deforestation, which is equivalent to the emissions from all cars and trucks on Earth. The value of our forests provided is immense, yet it remains largely invisible. And when the value is invisible, forests lose out. It is impossible for forests to compete against the short-term windfall of timber and newly cleared land for agriculture. Natural capital is the source of benefits nature provides. such as fresh water, flood control, and forest products, including cancer-treating drugs and many other medicines. Conservation of nature is vital to our existence in many ways. For example, each time species go extinct, the world around us unravels just a bit. The consequences are profound, not just in those places and for those species, but for all of us. These are tangible, consequential losses, such as crop pollination and water purification, but also spiritual and cultural ones. As one of many tools for conservation, nature-based tourism is a part of a complex system. It's people and places at each destination or region, and part of a political and institutional framework, which ultimately can link to the health and well-being of all living things. Interpret well-being as having 5 dimensions. Subsistence is the non-economic benefits that contribute to well-being, for example, health, nutrition, clean water, and shelter. Economic benefits are those that provide the ability to earn an income and to consume and to have assets. Cultural and spiritual is pride in community, confidence, and living culture, spiritual freedom, and education. And then political benefits are relating to issues of governance and thus influence all types of decision-making processes. If we understand well-being in this holistic sense, to include the social and environmental context in which we live, at present, many of our well-being face continual erosion. We know that nature's goods and services are the ultimate foundations of life and health. The quality of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and many other features of our natural environment play a significant role in health outcomes. As natural capital and ecosystem services experience increased stress and become even less abundant in the future, we can only expect the value of nature in our lives to substantially increase. According to those who have written a great deal about resilience thinking and resiliency on the ground, as we move deeper into the 21st century, we cannot afford to lose more of our resource base. For example, with fresh water as a basic human need, if the current water consumption patterns continue unabated, half the world's population will live in water-stressed river basins by 2020. 5 years from now. Our planet provides resources to support basic human needs. And the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reported that 842 million people, or 1 in 8 people in the world, are estimated to be suffering from chronic hunger, regularly not getting enough food to conduct an active life. Within the U.S. and other regions of the world, research has shown that geographic location, race, and ethnicity, and socioeconomic status affect an individual's environmental exposures and subsequent risks of negative health incomes. Economically disadvantaged communities are disproportionately affected by environmental conditions, and we're learning that now. For example, residents in high poverty neighborhoods report living in poor quality housing. We live in and are part of the ecosystem, and as such, our health and well-being is tied closely to our ability to sustain biodiversity and a vibrancy of ecosystem services our planet supports. And therefore, it is incumbent upon all industries, including tourism, to ensure we do not impede the functioning of the planet. As the planet not only serves ecosystems and the idea of sustaining biodiversity, it ensures health and well-being of human beings as part of this socio-ecological system our planet supports and the resources therein. As Bieber, Clem, and Martinez have stated, most of the richest ecosystems host human populations which have lived in harmony with nature for centuries. These populations are now among the poorest in the world and depend entirely on natural resources that surround them. If we want to conserve our resources, we must recognize the contribution of Native peoples and developing countries in maintaining these resources and share them with them the benefits arising from this exploitation. Society supports protected areas as one way of conserving biodiversity ecosystem services and supporting health and well-being. They are integral parts of sustainable development strategies, supporting the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are ideas that several countries have really latched onto and are striving towards. For those unfamiliar with the SDGs, or maybe as a reminder, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals address poverty, hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water and life on land, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships, all of which are linked within the socio-ecological system of protected area tourism in some way. And thinking about the system surrounding tourism, well-being, and protected areas, sustainability considers how benefits are shared through these relationships. For our purposes today, I define benefit sharing as a commitment to channel some returns, whether monetary or non-monetary, back to the range of designated participants. Currently, in our world, of our ocean services, and land-based protected areas, 15%. As you might anticipate, benefits include both tangible and intangible ideas, ranging from direct financial benefits from protected areas to the ability to use the natural resources in a protected area, to ecosystem services resulting from conservation within protected areas. Many of these benefits are difficult to measure and are often even more challenging to communicate to those around protected areas. Research has shown that even the communication and measurement of tangible financial benefits from, for example, tourism within protected areas is on an ad hoc basis, with many governments being totally unaware of the contribution to their economies. As the late Nelson Mandela has said, ultimately, conservation is about people. If you don't have sustainable development around these wildlife parks, then people will have no interest in them and parks will not survive. The fifth IUCN World Parks Congress adopted as a principle the following statement: protected area establishment and management contribute to poverty reduction at the local level, and at the very minimum must not contribute to or exacerbate poverty. With an ever-expanding human population and increasing competition for land, we see more conflicts over land with accompanying negative attitudes towards conservation. Human-wildlife conflict is often the perpetrator and the opportunity costs of conservation, which results in increased pressure on protected areas to provide benefits to those living in and around them. This competition between different primarily as countries focus on industry and development to build their economies and reduce poverty. Although the number and size of protected areas has been increasing, in part due to the Convention on Biological Diversity, to achieve particular targets aimed at protection, the funding that is available to manage them has remained generally stagnant and in many cases has declined, resulting in significant shortfalls and insufficient means to ensure effective achievement of conservation and livelihood goals. To ensure protected areas are effectively managed through appropriate levels of funding, innovative and creative mechanisms to support this funding are needed. New approaches, such as investing, are growing in number. See, for example, conservation capital. The promotion of legacy funds is another strategy. Protected area tourism, if well managed, can contribute to this shortfall. It is, however, not a panacea, despite a recent focus to expand and grow tourism in all protected areas. It is not relevant or suitable in all protected areas and should only provide one option in a suite of funding options. The World Bank states that tourism is a proven tool for development, with communities and destinations, as it is highly labor intensive. It facilitates new infrastructure development. It can help to fund conservation and can contribute to international understanding and peace. Recent trends in government, especially in areas of Africa and Latin America, to focus a powerful vehicle for economic growth and development, while at the same time has the potential to support conservation. This idea stems in part from the view the environment may be a threat and a consumption opportunity for the poor, yet a recreational luxury suitable for the wealthy. Also, this line of thinking supports a venue for wealth transfer from the affluent who want to enjoy the environment to the poor who frequently suffer from it. Research has demonstrated an increase in nature-based tourism can significantly impact the operational management of protected areas, with the related increase in economic benefits, supporting the financial sustainability of conservation efforts. So how do we ensure that these growing receipts from tourism are funding conservation and shared equitably with stakeholders? Increasing the complexities of tourism systems, coupled with the complexities of protected area management, call for a socio-ecological systems approach to understanding the nuances of various types of benefits. New models and partnerships are evolving to address many of these complexities. Yet research has demonstrated that tourism can provide value to society through the potential economic, environmental, and social benefits it can deliver. Understanding of these benefits, both tangible and intangible, and how they are shared is essential to illustrate their value. Over the years, research has also shown that perception of benefits can sometimes outweigh the actual receipt of benefits. Equity is an essential aspect in terms of the long related to benefit sharing. Some define equity as fairness or social justice, which has three dimensions: recognition, procedure, and distribution. Equity is also related to governance, which is about power, relationships, and accountability. A key aspect of governance is decision-making, which frequently involves tough choices between many competing objectives or trade-offs. An understanding of local community dynamics, hierarchies, and power sharing are also essential to develop methods to ensure that most marginalized and most impoverished in communities are also included in benefit sharing mechanisms. For stakeholders, consultation, joint decision-making, and advocacy are needed to move towards equity. So there are numerous diverse stakeholders engaged in tourism in protected areas, including government, local communities, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector, amongst others. Many of these stakeholders have different, sometimes conflicting objectives for being involved in protected area tourism, and some only appear once the benefits start appearing. Local communities in particular frequently bear the cost of living adjacent to protected areas through the negative impacts of human wildlife conflict, as well as the opportunity costs of not being able to use the land for agriculture or other developments. It is essential, as a result, that local communities, those living on that edge, receive benefits from conservation in protected areas and associated tourism. These benefits can be through direct receipts, but there has been a through joint ventures and other collaborative management models. Within the concept of stakeholder engagement, an assortment of influence empowers or actually disempowers individuals and communities at large. Psychological empowerment, for example, enhances self-esteem with the idea that access to economic gains such as employment and cash leads to an increase in status. The creation of a sense of pride in a community and increased access to typically underserved, such as youth and women, are evolving into benefits and being recognized by diverse stakeholders. Social empowerment enriches community cohesion amongst all stakeholders, with economic returns supporting community development activities. And political empowerment is described as a community's political structure, which fairly represents the needs and the interests of all and provides through which people can raise questions and have their concerns addressed. These empowerment facilities are deemed critical within the broad spectrum of elements of successful benefit sharing attributes. There is evidence that institutional frameworks can promote or detract from ways in which benefits come to fruition. Public versus private protected areas can impact how agreements, partnerships, formal and informal structures are developed. For example, within the Republic of Fiji, we started a community private partnership program called Rivers Fiji, located within the rural highlands of Viti Levu. Rivers Fiji began as a whitewater rafting and kayaking operation in 1998. In 2000, the company established the Upper Navua Conservation Area, as a privately protected river corridor. The Upper Navua Conservation Area is Fiji's first and only Ramsar site or wetland of international importance, and also protected through a lease for conservation. Despite the opposition of local government, the Local Government Leasing Authority, the lease for conservation was set up with not only a lease payment, but also revenue from each visitor to the river keep. In addition to clearly identify employment sharing benefits, ongoing revenue sharing is parallel to both the company's and the partnership's success. With the advantage of hindsight, had Rivers Fiji set this up with a traditional one-time lease of payment, as the tourism enterprise became increasingly successful, benefit sharing at the local community level would have remained stagnant. Instead, all the lease payment was set up by local communities, benefit continuously. Therefore, realizing the full value of the protected area partnership every time a tourist travels through the river corridor. This unique conservation effort calls upon tourist dollars to support the protection of Fiji's third largest river drainage, home to unique species of fish, parrots, and iguanas, and Fiji's only boa constrictor, and the largest intact groves of sago palm, now threatened in the rest of the Pacific. Let's take a few minutes to learn a bit more about this project through a video designed to increase support for conservation and decrease the potential of a dam for mining purposes. Live on its way.
The island dream, unexpected. This beach, sand, surf, sunsets, even fire. lucky to have seen rivers around the world. I've even run a few source to sea. So I guess I thought I'd seen what rivers could offer and the natural artwork they sculpt upon our landscapes. Honestly, no description could have prepared me for this. What the native people here refer to as the highway to their ancestors. Some call it the River of Eden. Others say it is the tropical Grand Canyon. Here in Fiji, the locals call it the Navua River. Beyond this undescribable beauty, something else lured me here. The Upper Navua River is the only protected river of its kind in the South Pacific.
When I was born, I heard stories about this area. This is like a route to all our ancestors out in this area. That's a good thing that we have protected from other developments like extracting gravel, mining, daming the whole river.
About 15 years ago, a small rafting they convinced the government that the long-term economic benefit of conservation and tourism outweighed the quick money from extracting the resources or damming the river. I came here to understand how so few people could protect such a spectacular corridor inside Fiji's volcanic heart.
The Upper Navua River Canyon is one of the most beautiful rivers on Earth. It is a tight, narrow canyon that probably is less than 20 feet wide in some places, spans up to 250, 300 feet high. It has dark black canyon walls fringed with green palms and ferns with trickles of water and waterfalls throughout the whole course. During the rainy season, we easily would never be out of sight upstream or downstream of a waterfall. And I've never been in a place where that is even remotely possible.
Welcome to my office.
There are several approaches to conservation in Fiji. The approach that we've used here at the Upper Navua Conservation Area is with children. We anticipate that bringing the children out to experience benefits of grandparents or the elders' decision to protect the area, we hope will inspire them to continue to manage it well for tourism and also, more importantly, for future generations.
Conservation is something we have to wake up to every day and say, we have to protect this place. It's never a fight that is over.
Children of the Matandai, they own land adjacent to the river to have to know its value and know that they have the power to protect it or to use it.
A Fijian friend told me of this ancestral river showed me value not only surrounds them in the form of beauty, but it also supports them.
I can say to my best friend that to be very respects everything that's temporary. This is the real reason.
So some of the things that we've learned from this operation are that a relatively small ecotourism operation can have positive impacts on a region, typically cut off for benefit from tourism, adding economic diversity and new community opportunities. and can expand employment through direct and indirect opportunities with increased opening for training and education. The economic and social benefits have also given communities and governments political capital to protect the cultural and natural resources in the region. And there have been ancillary health and well-being activities which have emerged, including the development of schools, health clinics, and improved technology for drinking water. The Rivers Fiji operation has all been an impetus for greater conservation efforts in the region. In addition to enhancing conservation of the area's fragile ecosystem, environmental outreach programs were developed through a partnership between Rivers Fiji and Nature Fiji, an NGO focused on the protection and conservation of the country's natural environment. Together, they provide communities with a series of environmental education river trips to experience firsthand the economic, environmental, and cultural importance of their own backyard. These programs are designed to motivate children and their families to think about sustainability and other conservation-based benefits for the future. Increasingly evident is that well-structured partnership agreements and governance structures and transparent benefit sharing processes provides opportunities for communities to connect to economic benefits and employment opportunities. While there are vast differences in these types of agreements, common to all must be a transparent structure of engagement and procedures for fair distribution of opportunities. In the case of Rivers Fiji, the landowning groups utilize traditional structures and practices for rotating the employment benefits between different groups. This is worked well and there's a complete buy-in by the landowning groups for this structure involved in the Upper Midway conservation area. Also, these structures or processes have increased the types of stakeholders engaged in various parts of projects, increasing awareness and ultimately more widely spread opportunities for benefit sharing within and across communities, including educational opportunities, healthcare, and tourism support services such as drivers, food supply, and infrastructure development. Being inclusive and understanding particular community needs to understand benefit sharing processes. And while economic benefits have been shown as critical, there are multiple ways in which these benefits may be fulfilled. Tourism managed well can act as an incentive for conservation by stopping illegal or destructive activities. This was also the case for Rivers Fiji with respect to illegal logging and unsustainable mining practices. Understanding the desires of residents and stakeholders is an essential consideration in conceptualizing the sustainability of tourism and benefit sharing within varying and diverse local contexts. For example, tourism enterprises have the ability to share benefits with communities and other stakeholders through provision of health services, improved water supply, increased educational support mechanisms, and increased diversity of employment opportunities. This also includes infrastructure development, sustainable resource management, and improved local attitudes towards resource conservation goals. So what I'm going to do now is quickly switch gears to explore this connection between a healthy planet and healthy people in light of this seemingly never-ending pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the tourism sector globally. Between January and May 2020, 100% of global destinations imposed travel restrictions and 45% totally or partially closed their borders for tourism. The World Travel and Tourism Council estimates that there could be a global loss of 197 million jobs and US 5.5 trillion in revenue due to the pandemic. With tourism largely suspended, growth throughout the tourism value chain could be rolled back. This is the scale of uncertainty and change that now threatens tourism. Prior to the pandemic, protected areas received roughly 8 billion visits annually. and generated approximately $600 billion a year in direct in-country expenditures and $250 billion a year in consumer surplus. In 2019, it was calculated that over a third of all direct tourism GDP across Africa could be attributed to wildlife, and 21.8 million jobs were supported by wildlife tourism globally. For many protected areas and conservation areas, the negative impacts of COVID on management capacity, budget, and effectiveness are significant, as are the impacts of the livelihoods of communities living in and around these areas. Furthermore, many staff and members of surrounding communities contracted COVID-19, and illness and deaths further reduced the agency's capacities to manage tourism. So let's just take a look at a couple of case studies from around the world to highlight the varied impacts of COVID on protected area tourism, as these examples address the complexities and differences in experiences based on location and context. In 2019, 15.3 million visitors spent an estimated $1.2 billion in local gateway regions while visiting National Park Service lands in my state of Utah. Park tourism supported 18.9 thousand jobs, generated 614 million income, and added 1.1 billion in value and 1.9 billion in economic output in Utah's economy. The impact of COVID-19 on rural and gateway communities that provide hospitality and related support for visitors has been significant. Arches National Park had 403,808 fewer visitors between March and May 2020. March was down by 38%, April by 100%, and May by nearly 94%. With a significant negative impact on the economic development, as parks opened back up and visitation rebounded, the number of COVID cases has also increased. Gateway communities around national parks were the hardest hit at the time, with the highest unemployment rates in Utah during the shutdown. Numbers are back up. In fact, Zion National Park has received 2 million visitors since the reopening in May, and September 2020 is busier than any other September on record. Addressing safety of visitors, employees, and community residents, as well as managing the enormous levels of visitations, are critical issues for the parks in southern Utah and their gateway communities. I'm going to move to across the world to Namibia. In Namibia, the story is very different. The pandemic halted all tourism and commercial air services in Namibia, which received 1.7 million international travels in 2019. Depending on how the pandemic plays out, Namibia's communal conservancy could lose 10 million in direct tourism revenues, threatening funding for over 700 game guards, 300 conservancy management, and the viability of 61 joint venture tourism lodges employing 1,400 community employees. The loss of tourism-dependent jobs will reduce incomes substantially, likely increasing the levels of poverty in conservancies and protected areas. Families will be forced to rely more heavily on extracting natural resources, including hunting wildlife, to sustain their livelihoods. Poachers of bushmeat and Namibia's iconic rhinos and elephants are expected to take advantage of the vacuum left by absent tourists and reduced monitoring and anti-poaching patrols. For the first time ever in over 2 years, a rhino was poached in a communal conservancy after the onset of the pandemic. Cumulative consequences of impacts could lead to the collapse of Namibia's world-leading conservancy program. In short, we are seeing significant impacts on the tourism system overall. The impacts of COVID on protected area tourism and the tourism system have been unprecedented. Our experience with COVID-19 shows that resilience is fundamental to the sustainability of protected area tourism. Resilience in terms of the health of visitors, local people, and staff, more diverse income streams for the local economy, greater attention given to equity and inclusiveness, and better understanding of large-scale contexts for tourism globally, such as changes affecting the airline industry. Long-term resilience for protected areas also means the local economy and reviewing financial viability of enterprise infrastructure, and possibly establishing long-term plans for investment, such as endowment. And spots. So the challenges ahead are not only difficult, but they are global, affecting many thousands of protected areas, the livelihoods of millions of them that depend on them, and millions of tourists that visit them. Addressing these relationships in a post-COVID-19 world provides an opportunity to reframe tourism so that it is more attentive to these dimensions. We must approach these challenges in an integrated way with a focus on healthy environments, healthy people. We need to recognize that preventing zoonotic diseases requires attention and careful management of biodiversity, and that diseases inject incredible uncertainty affecting the most vulnerable, often with devastating effects on economies dependent on tourism. The way forward for tourism could have 4 dimensions. First, developing a vision. Second, protecting biodiversity for its importance to the ecology of the area and for people's dependency on tourism. Third, attending to health and livelihoods by recovering and rebuilding local livelihoods and the health of residents and visitors. And fourth, reframing tourism, including the resources it uses to achieve productive and healthy livelihoods without degrading the biodiversity upon which it depends. Many have questioned to what extent COVID-19 will impact on protected areas, local communities, and wildlife. For example, the loss of income for conservation projects, damage and poaching in the absence of management present, or benefit. For example, the scope of ecological. This requires us to think differently about visitor experiences, benefit sharing, and communities, incorporating equity, diversity, and inclusion on all levels, and protected area policies and paradigms. We must be prepared for this challenge. As Ban Ki-moon said, saving our planet, lifting people out of poverty, advancing economic growth, these are one in the same fight. We must continue to connect the dots between climate change, water scarcity, energy shortages, global health, food security, and women's empowerment. Solutions to one problem must be solutions for all. Remember, idealism is difficult, and cynicism is not the only response. It is a choice. People throughout history have chosen to make progress on all kinds of issues that plague our society. Please remember to capture the moments that remind us what we do and hold on to that inspiration always. There are endless possibilities for an amazing future. Thank you so much. So I guess at this juncture, if anybody has any time left in their schedule today, we could take questions, but I realize that we've certainly gone over this time. So Hannah, up to you.
We have time for questions, Kelly.
Hi, sorry, I had to unshare my content. Yeah, we have some time for questions if you would like.
Sure, I'm available as long as you all are.
All right. So if everybody would like to type their questions into the chat, that would be awesome.
There's a question for you, Hannah. What's the YouTube channel name?
Sorry, I just realized I was muted again. All right, so the YouTube, I'll type it in the chat. It is Cortland Redcom, no spaces.
Videos will be up probably mid to end of next week.
So there is a question. How do you deal with gentrification that follows after these tourism programs? Well, I can't speak for every planning scenario, but I can say that one thing that we were really concerned about when we opened that proverbial tourism wedge in Fiji and this amazing canyon was what could happen following it. So before the Upper Navua actually opened for tourism, we ended up which identified what could and could not happen in that canyon for 24 kilometers. And I think that preventative step actually helped us from seeing other more destructive uses of the canyon not occur. So we're hoping our first lease was for 25 years, and the next lease will hopefully be for 99 years at the request of the communities. And so I think it's all about planning and ensuring that what values communities, local residents would like to retain are somehow integrated in that planning. Okay. Sorry, it's really tiny words. Hopefully that answered your question. If it doesn't, keep asking, and I'll try to better facilitate that. But I think what we've learned, I'm involved with, as I mentioned earlier, an organization that looks at criteria for sustainable tourism development. And there is a whole section about planning and including stakeholders in the vision of that plan. Along with the lines of gentrification, I'm also curious how income equality across partnerships are established as a result of the type of work. So that is part of the planning process too. And certainly there are people, like all of us may not want to run our own tourism enterprise. The way we did it in Rivers Fiji is the income that's created from every tourist going down the river actually goes back into community funds. And as long as there's good governance within these communities, the leadership in those communities. And typically, those are very representative of all the different landowning groups within that community. So I think that's a key aspect of it. I think sometimes those benefits can be shared through agreements with protected areas. And in those agreements, more and more attention is being paid to how to be fair and equitable to the communities that are supporting that conservation effort. So there's a lot of different strategies set up. In Namibia, I think they're known worldwide as one of the more prolific conservancy countries. So partnerships are set up with adjacent communities to these protected areas, and they run tourism enterprises and employ people from the communities, but also There's benefit sharing for those that don't want to be part of maybe delivering the tourism product. They do other things to help facilitate that. So it's a very diverse set of responsibilities that take place there. Let's see. What would you say, in my opinion, is the single most important takeaway from my presentation? Well, I know it was kind of the Debbie Downer kind of presentation. No offense to any Debbies in the audience, but I know that one thing that I would like you to take away is that small efforts can make a big difference, and paying attention to the holistically to all the factors that create a tourism product is really important, including those people that support it. While we need it for economic development, we need a balance. And so really integrating the needs, vision, wishes, desires by multiple stakeholders that are adjacent to these protected areas is really critical. Some may argue that gentrification is inevitable following these programs. How do you stop nearby communities from becoming tourist stops for the lack of a better term? I don't know that. I think it really depends on the interest of the community. So, one thing that Utah is grappling with, and I don't know that there's an easy answer, is because of COVID. We can blame a lot of things on COVID at this moment, but because of COVID, a lot of people are working remotely, right? And some of these companies may stay in that mode. So people are moving into areas that have high amenities, like national parks. And it's becoming sort of a thing that people need to really focus and concentrate on. I don't think you want to stop anything, but I think they have to consider what types of impacts and better planning tools they can initiate to really think about the impact of that long term. So I think, that's a big concern right here in Utah at the moment. And, I've listened to several community members from all across the state talk about this, and we're just sort of identifying this as probably a long problem overall. So I don't have any specific answers. I think certainly it comes in the planning and visioning and sustainable development thought processes that communities engage in. And if anybody else has any ideas, I'd love to have that conversation. But that is a hot topic right here in Utah at the moment. Well, I guess I just want to thank everybody for attending today. It's such an honor to be there, kind of in a box, but I hope to meet many of you in person one day, and really appreciate your time and attention. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelly. That was a great presentation. I love the vision. Thank you for being so patient with us at the beginning and sticking around.
Yeah, no worries. Guys, have a great day. Thanks so much.
You too.
Kelly, before you go, you re-grant me host. All you have to do, I'm going to.
What if I said no? Would that collapse the entire conference?
Yeah, might.
That for you. Well, I get a